Around November 17, 2001, almost 24 years ago, Justice League made its debut on Cartoon Network. It was produced by the animation legend Bruce Timm and served as a follow-up to his other awesome shows, Batman the Animated Series and Superman the Animated Series. Fans had been clamoring for the show for nearly a decade, and when it finally dropped, it didn't disappoint. The animated Justice League series was loaded with interesting tidbits, fun trivia, and hidden gems, which fans loved and happily devoured. They were even more excited when it evolved into the bigger Justice League Unlimited series in 2004. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. Which creator almost gave the Justice League a uniform look before being vetoed? Bruce Timm is a total legend in the DC world. He is the genius behind classics like Batman the Animated Series, Superman the Animated Series, and Batman Beyond. However, sources say that he was so close to making an error with Justice League. When Bruce Timm was working on the animated series, he considered giving the Justice League matching uniform costumes. When Timm brought it up to the DC president Paul Levitz, he was like, "Leave my big three, i.e. Superman, Wonder Woman, and Batman, out of this." He could mess around with Green Lantern and Flash, but he had to leave the big three alone. Not verbatim, but Paul said something along these lines. Maybe Timm wanted to create a more unified team look by moving away from the standard comic designs. And thank God they didn't, because it's hard to imagine them in matching sets, as it diminished the characters' distinct visual identities. In the end, those designs ended up being the inspiration for the Justice Lord's costumes. What was the original working title before it became just Justice League? The original plan was to name the series Justice League of America, to pay homage to the very first comic book featuring the Justice League, which had the same title. The comic book series was released in 1960, and it was based on the Justice Society of America. The JSA, featured in All-Star Comics from 1940 to 1951, was the earliest superhero team in comic book history. The name Society was later changed to League to avoid confusion with baseball. Now back to the question. The studio believed that calling the show Justice League would help it connect with a wider audience. You could say that it was a strategic decision to appeal to a broader, more international fan base, given the large fan base of DC's Justice League. While the Justice League is undeniably a classic American superhero team, restricting the title to Justice League of America limits the show's narrative. Ironically, the storylines of the show often transcend national borders, addressing extraterrestrial threats and global conflicts. So a title like Justice League fits better, since it shows that the team is all about protecting the whole planet and maybe even the universe. Why are there no sidekicks in the series? Everyone knows that Justice League isn't the first animated show to feature the League. Another cool show was Super Friends, which aired from 1973 to 1985. The main team in Super Friends included some of the iconic classic Justice League members: Superman, Batman, Robin, Wonder Woman, and Aquaman. The series was created during a time when children's television featured less violent, resulting in less intense action and a greater focus on teamwork, problem solving, and positive morals. The Super Friends animated series had sidekicks, but they were not always the ones typically seen with the main heroes in the comics. The show first introduced Marvin White, Wendy Harris, and their dog, Wonder Dog, as junior members and sidekicks of the Super Friends. They were shown as superhero trainees who helped the main heroes in different situations, solved mysteries, and sometimes even saved the world. However, they did not have superpowers, unlike later characters added to the show. To keep the show distinct and prevent any mix-ups, Timm and the other creators of Justice League decided that none of the sidekicks would make an appearance in the 2001 animated series. Which character wasn't allowed on the show for legal reasons? Shazam was originally called Captain Marvel, and it was this name that led to a long legal and trademark battle that kept Shazam out of the first seasons of Justice League. DC Comics had a long lawsuit against Fawcett Comics, the original publisher of Captain Marvel. They claimed that Captain Marvel was too similar to Superman. Here's the backstory. Captain Marvel first appeared in comics published by Fawcett Comics, making him a direct rival to Superman. In fact, there were times when his comics sold better than Superman's. Although the two characters were different, they had enough in common that DC decided to sue Fawcett, even calling Captain Marvel a ripoff of Superman. Did you know that Captain Marvel was originally called Captain Thunder? There was even an unpublished comic called Flash Comics #1, which was just a demo in black and white. But since DC already had a title called Flash Comics, Fawcett decided to switch things up and change the series name to Whiz Comics. Captain Marvel ended up making his first official appearance in Whiz Comics #2. Even after a lengthy battle, when DC picked up the character in the 70s, Marvel Comics had already rolled out their own Captain Marvel and snagged the trademark for the name. This meant that while DC could still use the character in their comics, they weren't allowed to use that name in titles, ads, or on any merch. Why was John Stewart picked as Green Lantern over the iconic Hal Jordan? It was a bit of a shock when the Justice League picked John Stewart to be their Green Lantern instead of Hal Jordan. After all, Hal Jordan was considered the OG who made his debut in Showcase #22. The comic shows how strong-willed Hal is, which is important because it's fundamental to use a Green Lantern ring, even though he goes through trauma and faces great fear, especially after losing his father and seeing his city destroyed. He always finds a way to overcome fear and move forward. That's why he was such an icon. So even though John Stewart wasn't actually the Green Lantern when the show was made, the creators decided to use him anyway. In fact, they didn't fully adapt his character from the comics and made some changes that were also incorporated into other adaptations. In the comics, Stewart was portrayed as an architect and much more pacifistic compared to Hal Jordan, who was an Air Force pilot. Timm depicted Stewart as a seasoned veteran of the US Marines with extensive combat experience. This aspect was later officially established as canon in the comics. Another reason for John Stewart being chosen as the Green Lantern instead of the more famous Lanterns was that it introduced an African-American character to the team, as he had appeared in Justice League comics before. The producers believed that his original rough personality could create more drama. Additionally, his inclusion added more diversity to the team. This choice helped revive interest in Stewart among fans who had almost forgotten him. What unique physical trait did John Stewart receive, and why? After Batman the Animated Series and Superman the Animated Series, Bruce Timm brought us the Justice League Animated Series as the next big thing in the DC Animated Universe. One of the standout characters was definitely John Stewart, aka Green Lantern. He really made a name for himself when he swooped in to save Batman and Martian Manhunter in the second episode. There was something really special about him that made him stand out. It was John Stewart's eyes, this awesome shade of green that matched his uniform perfectly. Fans have been curious about why this is the case, and it turned out that producer Bruce Timm came up with a compelling backstory that explained his unusual eye color. Timm says that the John Stewart version of Green Lantern was the first one not to wear a mask and openly show his identity. As a creative touch, Timm imagined that Stewart had been Green Lantern for so long that his energy had flowed into his whole being, giving him his distinctive green eyes. This is a really interesting backstory for the character. It shows how Timm and his team had thoughtfully developed each element of the Justice League team. How do they animate Superman's heat vision without outlines? In the Justice League Animated Series, Superman's heat vision is shown as a strong energy beam, and it creates a glowing effect without the usual black outlines as seen in most animations. This is likely done using different techniques, with one of the first being digital ink and paint. In fact, the Justice League series was one of the first shows in the DC Animated Universe to really take advantage of digital ink and paint. This tech gives animators more control over how thick the lines are, and lets them apply colors and effects, like glows, directly in the animation software. This means they can skip the old school method of inking that usually requires outlines. Another method they could have used is rotoscoping to create realistic visuals similar to Superman the Animated Series. Rotoscoping involves tracing over live action footage, frame by frame, to make the animation look more lifelike. This technique is especially helpful for capturing precise movements and effects, such as Superman's glowing eyes and laser beams from his heat vision. So, how did they achieve this? First, rotoscoping was used to trace Superman's eyes when he focuses his heat vision. Next, they added motion blur to show the speed and power of the heat vision. They often placed a white background behind the eyes to make them stand out and look like they are glowing. Finally, they merged the eye layers and changed the channel from alpha to luminance for further effects. Which future DCU scene convinced Timm that a Justice League series could work? After the Batman and Superman series, fans kept bugging Bruce Timm, asking, is a Justice League animated show coming next? But he always said, for almost 5 years that trying to make a Justice League series would be a mess with too many characters, and it would be too hard to manage. At the end of the production of Batman Beyond, Timm and the team introduced a future version of the Justice League called Justice League Unlimited. This version appeared in one of the last episodes of the series titled The Call. In this 2-part episode, an older, grayer Superman offers Terry McGinnis, aka Batman, membership in the Justice League Unlimited. However, Terry feels uneasy about the hostility he receives from the other League members. He becomes even more troubled when Superman shares that he suspects one of them may be a traitor. The episode really showed they could pull off some awesome team action. Suddenly, a Justice League animated series felt totally doable, and they were ready to roll. Why was Aquaman dropped from the original lineup? Many fans were surprised to see Aquaman missing from the Justice League Unlimited series after its first season, especially since he is usually one of the main members of the Justice League. It turns out that external politics significantly impact the internal production process. They were originally planning to have Aquaman in a live-action show like Smallville, which is why he got pulled from the other media adaptations, like the cartoons. Unfortunately, the show did not get picked up after its pilot. This means that, in the end, it felt like a waste of effort. A lot of people think one reason the Aquaman movie was so awesome is that the character wasn't really used much before that, so maybe not seeing him in the later seasons turned out to be a good thing after all. Which character makes a sneaky appearance that many people don't know about? You could totally binge watch all of Justice League Unlimited every single day and still not catch Nightwing's cameo in the series. And no, I'm not kidding about it. Because of the ban on a lot of Bat characters, Dick Grayson's cameo ended up being super brief. It's so short that it's literally just 8 seconds long. Blink and you'll totally miss it. In the episode Grudge Match, which is the 9th episode of the 3rd season, our heroes go to Bloodhaven, a city where Nightwing is in charge of keeping the peace. During a wide shot of the area, we see a row of gargoyles. One of these gargoyles moves, revealing that it's actually Nightwing, Batman's former sidekick, crouching there. We see Nightwing only as a black silhouette, so it's the only clear sign that it's him in his signature hairstyle. That, along with the way he is just hanging out on a rooftop, looking pretty intimidating, and he looks like someone who's had some serious training from Batman or something. How did the Watchtower base become what it is on screen? This little tidbit of information is one of my favorite facts. The Justice League animated series had this cool space station called the Watchtower that orbited Earth. It was basically their headquarters in the sky. Believe it or not, this is an exciting combination of 2 famous comic book locations. The first one was the JLA satellite, which served as the headquarters for the team. It was a space station located 22,300 miles above the Earth in geosynchronous orbit. The team used it as their home from 1970 to 1984. Meanwhile, in Grant Morrison's awesome 90s JLA comics, they came up with the Watchtower, which is the team's cool base on the moon. Our brilliant creator, Bruce Timm, took that idea and turned the Watchtower into an orbiting space station. It became so popular that the comics decided to go with it too. Which voice actor switched between Lex Luthor and the Flash? One episode of Justice League features Lex Luthor and the Flash swapping bodies. This moment is well known among comic fans and cartoon lovers because it's quite hilarious. Luthor tries to expose Flash's secret identity, but realizes he doesn't know who is behind the mask. When they swap minds, they don't switch voice actors, so you get to hear Michael Rosenbaum, the voice of the Flash, voicing Luthor while he's in the speedster's body, which is pretty cool, if we're being honest. What's more interesting than this swap is that Michael Rosenbaum also played Lex Luthor in the live-action show Smallville, which started 5 years later. This meant that, for one awesome episode, he was both the live-action and cartoon voice of Superman's biggest enemy. It was like he was some quirky icon of bald bad guys. Why did Superman seem weak frequently in early episodes? In the early episodes of the Justice League animated series, Superman sometimes came off as weaker or less capable than the other team members, especially Batman. The reason why writers did this is that they wanted to highlight the threat from the villains and make sure Superman did not overshadow the rest of them. It is said that the show uses a storytelling trick known as the Worf effect. Basically, a strong character like Superman gets taken down or knocked out by a new villain. This move makes the villain look tough and raises the stakes for the other heroes. If Superman has trouble or is taken out early, it shows that the threat is serious. This would mean that the whole Justice League needs to work together to defeat it. One reason to show Superman as not completely all-powerful might have been to prevent him from overshadowing other members of the Justice League. If his powers are too strong, they may appear less important or even unnecessary. By slightly reducing his powers, writers create a better balance and highlight the unique roles of each hero on the team. So, Superman was intentionally toned down, so don't get discouraged, Superman fans. What's the story behind the Bat family's absence? The term Bat embargo refers to the lack of Bat characters, except for Batman himself. Many storylines in the Justice League cartoon tend to focus on Batman. While these Bat-centric stories are often highlights of the series, it's important to maintain balance. The show should include all members of the Justice League, not just the Dark Knight. With all the Batman-related stuff going on with the Batman cartoon and the Dark Knight movies, they decided to scale back on how much Batman content would be included in Justice League Unlimited. This mainly affected characters linked to Gotham's protector, like Batgirl and Robin, who were completely left out of the series. This choice had both benefits and drawbacks. While it might have been wise to avoid overwhelming viewers, it also meant that many relevant and interesting characters could not be included in the show. Unfortunate, but some things need to be done for the best. Is it true that Stan Lee once reimagined the Justice League? In the early 2000s, Marvel Comics creator Stan Lee had the chance to reimagine many of DC's characters in the Justice League. He did this under a new imprint called Just Imagine. Lee gave these characters a style similar to Marvel's. Each character was featured in their own book. He applied his Marvel-like writing to popular characters such as Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, Green Lantern, Robin, Shazam, The Flash, Aquaman, Catwoman, Sandman, and the JLA. For example, in the case of Batman, he imagined a character named Wayne Williams. Williams is black and has no superpowers. He is in good physical shape like Bruce Wayne. In his backstory, he loses his father, who is a police officer. Later, Williams is wrongly accused of a crime and sent to prison. While he's in prison, he spends a lot of time working on his body and mind. When he finally gets out, he becomes a wrestler and goes by the name Batman to make some cash. After tracking down the person who set him up and caused his dad's downfall, he takes him out and decides to spend his life fighting for justice as a crime fighter. The rest of the characters have changed too, and some characters more than others. Does Justice League have a Marvel Comics connection? Justice League was all about honoring the DC Comics heroes, but the producers were also really into Marvel Comics. They managed to sneak in a few cool Marvel references, and some of you might have totally missed them. For instance, in the episode Tabula Rasa, we are introduced to the android Amazo. He is a classic DC villain who can absorb the powers of the Justice League. In the cartoon series, Amazo was redesigned, and his story became similar to that of Marvel's Adam Warlock. Both characters are androids created by mad scientists. They left Earth and grew into powerful beings. In fact, Amazo even has golden skin, and we know who else has that same skin tone: Adam Warlock. Another instance of Marvel reference is in the Wake of the Dead episode of Season 2 of Justice League. The episode features a team that resembles the lineup of Marvel Comics Defenders from the 1970s. Defenders comics included characters like Doctor Strange, Namor the Submariner, the Incredible Hulk, Silver Surfer, and Valkyrie. In Justice League, similar characters from DC represents these heroes. Dr. Fate represents Doctor Strange, Aquaman is like Namor, Solomon Grundy stands in for the Hulk, and Hawkgirl takes on the role of Valkyrie. Just as in the Defenders comics, Grundy calls Aquaman Dumb Fishman, identical to how Hulk refers to Namor. Why did the season finales always feel bigger than the rest? When they were putting together the first season of Justice League, Bruce Timm and the team wanted to make sure the seasons wrapped up with a big finale. They thought it was important to have exciting endings instead of just finishing things without much of a bang. That's why a lot of the big finishing arcs usually involve large-scale battles involving the entire Justice League and super intense life or death situations for Earth or the whole universe, like an alien invasion or a major attack from Darkseid. This made the series feel a lot more straightforward compared to the other shows in the DC animated universe. Plus, it added some excitement among the viewers with a big finale to look forward to at the end of the season. What Wonder Woman storyline was included in the comics, and which weapon made a late appearance? Wonder Woman's origin story has remained largely unchanged over the years. It begins when pilot Steve Trevor crashes on Paradise Island. To leave and go to Man's World, Diana must prove herself in an Amazon contest. After winning the contest, the Amazons give her the Wonder Woman costume and weapons. However, in the Justice League episode Secret Origins pilot, when Diana's mother tells her not to leave their Amazon home, Themyscira, Diana still takes away the armor and weapons in the middle of the night, Patty Jenkins' Wonder Woman also used this same story detail, which we now know was created for the Justice League cartoon years before. This is a cool tidbit about the Justice League that a lot of folks might not be aware of. Now, the lasso of truth is one of Wonder Woman's most famous weapons. It forces anyone caught in it to tell the truth when asked questions, and the lasso makes sure that the person cannot lie. Wonder Woman did not use her lasso to make characters tell the truth in Justice League. The creators chose not to include this because they thought it would make Wonder Woman seem too powerful, and they wanted a balanced team instead. So, in Justice League Unlimited, the creators finally let Wonder Woman use her famous lasso of truth. Which series finale was originally intended as the show's end? Looking at the completed Justice League Unlimited show now, it seems hard to believe that it was not always meant to follow up after the original Justice League cartoon. And we're not kidding. The Justice League series was initially set to end with the episode Star-Crossed, and there were no plans for Unlimited. Cartoon Network saw how popular the show was and surprised everyone by suggesting they make a follow-up series. That's how Justice League Unlimited came to life, and it ended up running even longer than the original show. In fact, Unlimited is in the same boat because it was also set to wrap up after its second season. So, the final episode of Justice League Unlimited is called Epilogue. This episode wraps up the story of the DC animated universe. A key part of the story is in Batman Beyond, where Terry McGinnis discovers more about his background and how Cadmus influenced his birth. This was supposed to mark the end of the DC animated universe, but it turned out to be anything but that. Since the Epilogue episode aired, we've noticed connections and hints in movies related to Justice League, sequels to Batman the Animated Series, and even a film that ties back to it. Who knows? It might not be long before the series makes a big comeback. What major direct-to-video film was planned to bridge to JLU? When Justice League Crisis on Two Earths was released in February 2010, not many knew, but it had a bit of a backstory. It was actually based on a script for a movie that got cancelled. Before 2010, the plan was to make Justice League Worlds Collide alongside the first season of Justice League Unlimited. This project aimed to explain what happened between the Justice League second season cartoon and the start of Justice League Unlimited. Bruce Timm, the architect and brain of the DC animated universe, announced that the project Worlds Collide would be released soon. Little did he and the fans know that it would ultimately be cancelled. This decision likely came from concerns about how to connect the Justice League cartoon with the later Unlimited series. The movie, Crisis on Two Earths, used much of the same script but removed all references to the DCAU. Which character got included at fans' request in JLU? Even though Justice League was a big hit, it didn't quite hit the mark for every DC fan since some of their favorite characters weren't included. One character that fans really wanted to see was Green Arrow, who stood out as the most requested by far. As a result, Green Arrow was the first hero to appear in Justice League Unlimited at the fans' request. How wild is that? This choice was a way to show fans that the creators were listening to them. Green Arrow, also known as Oliver Queen, is a superhero skilled in archery. Oliver was recruited into the Justice League team after the Thanagarian invasion. He mainly acted like the team's moral compass. Why did Hawkgirl ditch her mask in Unlimited? When the show switched from Justice League to Justice League Unlimited, a few characters had some minor changes to their outfits, but Hawkgirl's new look was the most noticeable. She ditched her hawk mask altogether. The idea behind this was that she wanted to move on from everything that happened in Justice League after the Star-Crossed episode, and leaving the mask behind was a way to symbolize that. In fact, now that we're discussing masks, there's another interesting tidbit that's not often discussed. People might assume that since everyone in the league is a hero, they can totally trust each other with their identities. But that's not really true, as Dwayne McDuffie, the producer, pointed out. So, the characters only know each other's real identities when the series specifically states it. This might seem unusual, but it most likely comes from Batman's cautious approach. Which group couldn't be called Legion of Doom? In the Justice League animated series, especially in Justice League Unlimited, there's a group of supervillains led by Gorilla Grodd, and later Lex Luthor, known as the Secret Society. They couldn't officially be called the Legion of Doom on screen because of some restrictions from the DC higher-ups. Apparently, DC had a policy against it at that time. The creators of the show wanted the group to be called the Legion of Doom so badly, which, by the way, is inspired by Super Friends, and the name actually matches their prime aim, i.e. to destroy the world or be a thorn in the League's side. In fact, they're mostly referred to by that name, and even the Season 2 DVD package uses it, but the DC imposition still remained the same. Is it true that Batman has a file detailing ways to defeat the entire JLA? Yes. Whenever someone says Batman could take anyone in a fight, they should also throw in the part about if he has time to get prepared. Cause when it comes to the Dark Knight, he always comes prepared. He has used his skill to beat stronger enemies, and since he doesn't trust people easily, he even gets ready to fight his allies. Ra's al Ghul steals his plans and uses them against his friends, exposing Batman's betrayal. So what are his plans? Well, to defeat Superman, he makes a type of red kryptonite that makes Superman's skin see-through. This causes him to feel overwhelmed by the Earth's sun. For Wonder Woman, he creates tiny machines that trap her in a virtual reality where she fights against someone who is just as strong as she is. She refuses to give up and keeps fighting until she exhausts herself and dies. In the case of Flash, he can be stopped by being hit in the back with a vibra bullet. This bullet causes him to have seizures because of his speed. These seizures occur at lightning speed, making the Flash completely unable to move. Green Lantern can actually be taken down by hypnosis. If someone hypnotizes him into believing he's blind, the ring will follow his will and make him blind for real, which means he won't be able to use his powers. In Batman's plan against Aquaman, he uses Scarecrow's fear toxin to make Aquaman afraid of water. Since Aquaman gets his powers from being in water, that fear totally weakens him. Martian Manhunter struggles with fire. Doctors inject him with tiny robots called nanites that make him feel as if he is always on fire. This affects his Martian body and plays on his fear of fire. Plastic Man has this crazy body that makes him tough to beat, so Batman's got a plan to cover him in liquid nitrogen to freeze him. And after reading this, Ra's and his men give it a try and add a smack with a hammer, which breaks him into pieces. Strangely, Batman even has a backup plan in case he ever goes off the rails. He says the best way to take him down is to snatch someone he really cares about to throw him off his game. I gotta say, after this, nobody's gonna want to mess with Batman. Who knows what he's got up his sleeve for you? What huge character database did the team create before production? Not many people know this, but Bruce Timm and his team created a backstory guide for each character they wanted to use in the Justice League. They planned the story and character development even before the animation series began. When you're taking on a big project like the Justice League adaptation, it's important to whip up a solid backstory and character database. This really helps keep everything consistent and accurate, and when you pull it all together, it makes for an awesome show, just like the JLA. This backstory Bible included many new plot twists. For example, it changed the relationship between Batman and Wonder Woman, replacing the popular romance between Wonder Woman and Superman. It also included the complex relationship between John Stewart's Green Lantern and Hawkgirl, along with Shiera's eventual betrayal. Which villain was saved from death by an animation error? Cheetah was a major player in the Injustice gang, but no, she didn't actually have 9 lives. That whole idea popped up because the character was originally meant to be killed off at the end of the Injustice for All storyline. So what actually happened in the episode? Cheetah tries to escape from the Injustice gang because they think she is a traitor. The Joker electrocutes her, and then Solomon Grundy takes her away. How she survives is not explained, but now you should know that an animation error showed Cheetah alive at the end of the episode. The situation occurred again, where she was found alive, and perhaps in this case, there wasn't an animation error. This time, it was in Justice League Unlimited, titled Alive. She was killed when Darkseid used his Omega Beam to destroy the Legion of Doom's headquarters. So, how did she survive? Cheetah and the other members were saved by the power of Star Sapphire's crystal and Sinestro's ring. Looks like it's true what they say. Cats might really have 9 lives after all. Why was the Suicide Squad renamed Task Force X? The Suicide Squad has become super popular in DC Comics, especially with the success of the recent movie. They made an appearance during the run of Justice League Unlimited, though they weren't referred to by name back then. The squad was renamed to Task Force X due to network censorship and broadcast standards. The word suicide was considered too sensitive to be broadcast in a children's animated series on Cartoon Network in the early 2000s. Consequently, the group was renamed Task Force X, which is sometimes used interchangeably with Suicide Squad in the comics. And what did the group do? Task Force X is a group of agents assigned by the government to complete missions that seem impossible. Writer Robert Kanigher created the group in the comics, and Ross Andru illustrated it. Which character was designed to look like Mark Hamill in the series? Mark Hamill was already in the DC animated universe, and he's pretty famous for his awesome role as the Joker. He appeared twice on Justice League, but later, the producers gave him another role in the series as the Flash villain, the Trickster. This was a fun nod for fans who have been around for a while because Mark Hamill played the character in the 90s show The Flash. Not only did Hamill voice Trickster in Justice League Unlimited, but the animators totally made him look like Hamill too. It's like the ultimate nod to him, and it's definitely one of the coolest Justice League fun facts out there. How did the Justice League become open to bigger stories? Back in the day, before streaming took over, serialized storytelling in TV shows was pretty uncommon, especially in animated ones. Cartoons from the 1980s and 90s were mostly shown in syndication, which meant episodes could play in any random order. Every episode of the series was a standalone story, while Justice League featured multi-part episodes that contributed to a larger epic narrative. Although the DCAU had some continuity before, Justice League made the overall story integral to the experience, with each episode being enjoyable on its own, yet unforgettable within the broader context. The storytellers believed that kids were up for a more complicated and connected story that went beyond just a usual 23-minute episode. Justice League used serialized storytelling to engage with viewers of all ages. The producers knew the DCAU reached beyond just kids, but they still focused on their younger audience. The characters developed and changed throughout the series, with their actions leading to real consequences down the line. While it's fun to watch shows with static characters, Justice League proved that animated TV can offer so much more than just light entertainment. Every show has its struggles, and Justice League was no exception. Season 1 had a few issues, mainly due to its lack of an overarching story. The missions were entertaining but too loosely connected. However, it laid the groundwork for Season 2, which is considered one of the finest of the DCAU. Season 2 focused more on character development and included the iconic Thanagarian invasion, fully realizing the potential that Season 1 hinted at, which resulted in one of the greatest superhero stories that has ever been shown on TV. Some believe animation is inferior to live action, but Justice League proved otherwise. Its artistic freedom allowed for more epic storytelling than was possible in live action at the same time. Justice League's awesome quality and popularity really kicked off a golden age for traditional animation from the 2000s to the 2010s, and a lot of fans totally agree with that. By embracing serialization, JLA opened itself up to larger and more expansive stories. Marvelous verdict. DC Comics characters have been around for over 8 decades, and each modern adaptation has its strengths. Even with everything else going on, one adaptation still holds a special place in fans' hearts: the Justice League series. It managed to balance some fun, silly moments with deeper ideas, making it a hit with everyone, no matter their age. The show treated its viewers like equals, mingling fun with a genuine respect for the characters. It gave DC Comics fans exactly what they wanted: their favorite heroes teaming up in a cool, engaging way. That brings us to the conclusion of today's video. Which fact or tidbit did you find the most interesting? Which fact did you already know? Don't forget to let us know in the comments section below. That's a wrap. Thanks for watching.